Absolutely. We all need to feel like we're living our best life. And if you feel like you're trapped, it's a golden prison, but it's still a feeling of being in a prison, because you're not doing the things you value. And when you do that, so if I were listening to this today, I would go, and you're not feeling happy, sit down and think about, what do I value? What would I love to have more of? Is it time with my little kids to see them grow up? Is it, time to take walks or pursue a sport or a hobby I want, and do those things? Or you may not be able to do it today, but if you take plans and you're moving forward in your life, you always feel better. If you're on a step to getting to what you value, would be my suggestion.
Great suggestion. And you mentioned the concept that they feel stuck. And I think so many do, because they're making so much money and they don't want to step back or whatever. But my message to that person is, you're absolutely not stuck. You have a choice, and you should choose to do what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled. And you have that right to do that. And sometimes the sense of feeling stuck comes from maybe other people, feeling other people would judge us if we choose something different.
Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles. The Free Lawyer Podcast is designed for the lawyer, entrepreneur, or professional who is in some way unfulfilled, stressed, or stuck, and is looking for something better. We will discuss various blocks that limit us from achieving the personal freedom that we all desire, but have not yet fully experienced. And we will give actionable steps to free yourself from them. Are you looking to achieve a new level of success? If so, this podcast is for you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Free Lawyer. I'm glad each and every one of you is here. Before we get started with our dynamite topic today, just want to share a couple things with you. I've now started a YouTube channel, and you can watch today's podcast as well as listen to it. If you go to my YouTube channel, I'll put a link to find it in the show notes. I thank each and every one of you for your support. I really appreciate you. And one thing you could do to help me, if you're open to it, is to go to the site where you listen to this and leave a rating and review, because those help the podcast get seen by more people. And you'll know that's my goal, to get this message out to as many struggling legal professionals as I can who want support. So thank you in advance for doing that. You all know how important the topic of wellness and mental health is to me. And that's going to be our focus today, because I'm honored to have with us simply an incredible guest, Lisa Ross. And Dr. Ross is both an educator and a counselor and a therapist. And she is the clinical director of New Leaf Teletherapy. And New Leaf has a mission of helping to improve wellness in education, but also in the legal world. And they focus on helping lawyers and law firms get the support and counseling that they need to handle the stresses of our profession. So with that introduction, Lisa, how are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for having me on today.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. So with your background, first in education for quite a long time, and then in counseling, what prompted you to transition to advocating for mental health within the legal profession?
Well, one of the things that we do a lot, as I like to do research, is figure out where there's the highest need. And the legal profession is in the top 3 or top 5 of the most burnout professions. And education is at the top right now, but it's still significant. And when you say mental health or burnout, sometimes people think that's just a mental state, but there's so many at-risk factors with that. Lawyers are more likely than the general population to think about suicide. The health risks that come with chronic stress that they deal with affects your entire body. So to me, most of the world's not there yet, but to me, mental health is physical health. And it's so important that people start to think that way and protect themselves.
Yeah, mental health really is physical health. I know I'm not an expert trained in the field like you are, but I've seen so many lawyers who are under so much stress and may suffer from depression or substance abuse, but also can affect their physical health. They don't eat well, they don't exercise, they don't have time to take care of themselves. They may get overweight, have high blood pressure, things of that nature. So it really is physical health. So as a clinical director of New Leaf, how do you approach providing mental health support to lawyers, and what unique considerations are involved in providing that sort of therapy to lawyers?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are some unique barriers to that. Some of them are just stigma related, and generational differences. The older an individual is, the more likely they think that it's just not a topic one should bring up. It's keep calm and carry on, or deal with it the best way you can. We find, and research supports that the younger folks entering the profession, people in their mid-late 20s, are much more open and more willing to advocate and seek mental health support and look for it, or leave a job if they feel like it's toxic for them. The other considerations, research says lawyers don't even like to talk to other lawyers, and they definitely worry about confidentiality and having a diagnosis in the system, so to speak. So pure confidentiality is an important thing. At New Leaf, we don't diagnose. I kind of work from a wellness model that everyone's an individual. And I think that's a little more appealing, because you're not sitting around somewhere in a doctor's office and an insurance carrier with a DSM-5 diagnosis of major depressive disorder. I think that's appealing to people. Just talk to me as an individual. Don't label me or diagnose me.
Right. And I can relate to that. I've been sober in recovery for 32 years now. And I know in the beginning, it wasn't something I shared with my doctor, even though there are many good reasons I should. But I didn't, because I didn't want it in a record that if I then had to get life insurance, they would see that notation in a record. So I get that. And when I first got sober, I felt there was much more of a stigma than there is today. But today there's still that perception of stigma. Why is it, do you think, you mentioned the difference between more mature lawyers and newer lawyers in terms of their willingness to seek support? Why is it that an older generation of lawyers is not as willing, do you think, to get the therapy and support that they need to manage the stresses of their profession?
Well, I can relate to that. I'm 63, and I will say that when we came along, counseling was kind of more in its infancy and evolving. There was a stigma to that. If you went to a counselor or got an antidepressant, because you were crazy. There was something wrong with you mentally. And of all professions, a lawyer wants to think of himself and present him or herself, themselves, I should say, as strong, competent, in charge, in control. And I think our generation just grew up with that stigma. Yeah. And each decade that's gone by, it's gotten a little better, but we're still not where we should be. One day, like I said, we'll be at the point where we realize constant stress, adrenaline, cortisol flooding through your system causes all the things you mentioned, Gary, but it also, it causes irritable bowel disease, prolonged inflammation, which then leads to cancer and heart disease. So, I'm hoping as we really think about it that we are biological beings, and that our brain is really not anything but another organ of our body. We need to take care of it just the way we take care of our heart, or, everything else about our life.
One of the things that troubles me is that if I were diagnosed with a physical disorder, Parkinson's disease, you name some that I might be. My brother was a practicing lawyer and went blind in his 40s. And he received, obviously, a lot of support and understanding and encouragement from everyone around him. But if I struggle with alcoholism or depression or anxiety or bipolar, any of those conditions, we often feel judged. Like we don't feel supported. Yes. We feel looked down upon and scorned. And that's a really unfortunate circumstance. But have you encountered that as well, that people feel like they're treated differently if they have a mental health problem as compared to a physical health problem?
Yes, I think it's getting better, but it's there. And I encounter a lot with clients. Research shows the best treatment is something like cognitive behavior therapy. That's the gold standard, combined with medication. And an individual that would not hesitate to take insulin for diabetes will often say, no, I will not take medicine. I will do it on my own. Yeah, I hear that a lot with lawyers, because they're independent people. But it is a biological condition, is your brain's not creating enough of a certain something. So managing that stigma, it's an uphill battle. We're getting there, but with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, that's part of, why I love being on here. It's just to promote the message. There are
Spread the word.
options to feel better.
That's so important. I saw one of your posts where you talked about the differences between stress, anxiety, and burnout,
Yeah.
which I think of burnout as a result of stress and anxiety, but I often think of stress and anxiety as being the same, and they're not. What are the differences between them?
Yes, one, stress is what I would call coming into you, inward facing. It's the things that you think of with the legal profession: tight deadlines, need to be perfect, high expectations of performance, long hours. That's stress. And there can be things that are good stress too. Like if you upgrade and buy a beautiful new home, it's a little stressful. It's good stress, but stress. Anxiety is much more coming from the inside. Anxiety is coming from thoughts going on inside of you that I need to be better. I'm not enough. I'm an imposter. The imposter syndrome is something that's talked about some in the legal profession.
Yes, it is.
They're messages, almost like an audio tape playing in the back of your mind that create this sense of something's not right, impending doom kind of feeling, like I've got to do this, I got to do that, I got to be better. So in a sense, we're creating that on our own because of what we've learned as we've grown up, and maybe the expectations of our job. So they're one's coming from the outside, one's coming from the inside. And like you said, burnout is what I call stress on steroids. If you just think about it, if you have prolonged stress for a long period of time, you get into this almost spiral of things that look like depression, or is depression, and hard to recover from.
How can understanding those distinctions between stress, anxiety, and burnout inform the strategies one might use to cope with them?
Oh, that's a great question. What I talk to clients about a lot of times is we need to just sort of slow down and and lawyers are good at this, if I can get them to come to counseling, is logically analyze the argument, almost like you would in a court case. You go, what is the source of this thought? Like, let's say you're feeling terrible anxiety. Your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty. You don't really have a really specific reason. You're not going to be in court in 10 minutes arguing a death penalty case. Why do you feel like that? So you kind of go, what's the theme? And, and you can kind of pull that out. The theme might be, I've got 25 briefs to file by tomorrow morning. That's an outward facing stress thing. You're feeling time management crunch. But if you're thinking, like a lot of people will tell me in the legal profession, my thoughts are on this theme of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. That's anxiety. And you're really learning to parse that out is a strong mental health, self-help thing one can do for themselves. Because if it's an argument that's coming from yourself, you can almost logically argue that out, that you have evidence that you are enough, that you are good enough, that you can manage this. So a lot of times I spend a lot of time just training people on how to think about their problems and analyze them.
A lot of it comes down to being self-aware, isn't it?
Yes.
When am I starting to feel stressed? Because often I'll feel a physical reaction. My heart races, my throat might get dry, I might feel a little shaky. And what's causing that? Like, it helps for us to really identify the source of our stress so we can then maybe figure out how to manage it.
Right. And I'll tell you, a lot of times, particularly in high performance professions like medicine and law or even teaching, we seem to not do that. We seem to go, oh, I'm just going to work harder. And if I work harder and get more done, I'll feel better. And actually what you're doing is you're like feeding the anxiety. Anxiety to me is like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Broadway show Little Shop of Horrors, but there's this plan in there that goes, feed me. Anxiety's like that. It likes to be fed. And the more you play into it by working more or doing more and getting your heart rate up, whatever it is, it just grows. It doesn't get better. It just takes over your life more and more. And you actually end up that's how panic attacks happen and things like that.
So we've talked some about the stress that lawyers feel, and it comes from a lot of different places. And I've chatted about them a lot and written about them, whether it's the bill of wire system, workload, pressure from clients, difficult lawyers on the other side of the case. So for the lawyer who's listening today, one solution is obviously to get therapy from someone like your company, New Leaf. But before they do that, what would be some strategies or suggestions you have for the lawyer who's listening to you today and says, Dr. Ross, that's how I feel. I feel stressed and anxious. It's driving me crazy. What suggestions do you have for that person?
One of the things you can really do to help yourself a lot is to really think about what your values are in life. There's some free online values assessments. I do that a lot of times when I start with lawyers, like your top 5 values, and it's sort of a forced choice thing. And if you've come up with the fact that your top values are your family, honesty, financial stability, focus your thoughts, your dreams, and everything you do around those values. Because for some reason, when those all align, that's where the magic happens. You start feeling more personal freedom. And a lot of lawyers and even doctors I've worked with, worked with people making $500,000 a year and they hate their job because it's just soul sucking, they call it. I'm not doing the right thing. And when it feels like I'm not doing the right thing, it means you're not embracing your true values, what's important to you. And those are different for everybody, but I would start with that.
Dr. Ross, I think that's brilliant. I have not thought about it as a professional like you, but I know that I've seen so many lawyers are unhappy because they took the first, or what would appear to be the best job that was offered to them, the one with the most money, the one with the most prestige, the one with the biggest, most famous law firm. And they get in there and they find that they're miserable, and sometimes pretty shortly. And I've often said, and I've written about, I've had an episode of podcast about this, what they need to do is figure out what their core values are, what's most important to them, and how much money do they really need to make, how much time do they want with their family, how much independence do they want, how much autonomy, what kind of law do they want to practice, what kind of firm or organization they want to be in, figure that out, and then make that happen. And then if they're doing what they want with the people they want in the kind of firm or organization, they won't feel so unhappy and so stuck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all need to feel like we're living our best life. And if you feel like you're trapped, it's a golden prison, but it's still a feeling of being in a prison because you're not doing the things you value. And when you do that, so if I were listening to this today, I would go, and you're not feeling happy, sit down and think about, what do I value? What would I love to have more of? Is it time with my little kids to see them grow up? Is it, time to take walks or pursue a sport or a hobby I want, and do those things? Or you may not be able to do it today, but if you take plans and you're moving forward in your life, you always feel better. If you're on a step to getting to what you value, would be my suggestion.
Great suggestion. And you mentioned the concept that they feel stuck. And I think so many do, because they're making so much money and they don't want to step back or whatever. But my message to that person is, you're absolutely not stuck. You have a choice, and you should choose to do what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled. And you have that right to do that. And sometimes the sense of feeling stuck comes from maybe other people would judge us if we choose something different.
Yes.
And you should all chase your own dream, whatever that might be. I know you've done a blog post on alcoholism in the workplace, and it's astonishing to me, the self-reported rates of substance abuse in the legal profession, 25% to a third. It's really astonishing. How can law firms and really individuals handle that problem of substance abuse that can be so impactful on the organization?
It's a big challenge in the legal profession. I have a study I had read recently before I did that in one study, 98% of lawyers that screened as being high risk for alcohol use disorder, or actually really into alcohol use disorder, 98% never sought treatment. They were trying to fix it on their own. Some of the things I've read in the literature are to do things that might change a little bit of the culture. Like when you're don't make fun get-together times for employees. Maybe don't have them center around going out to have drinks together, right? Try not to encourage people to see who's the toughest by knocking down the most shots, those kind of things. That's just common sense. But a lot of social gatherings in the legal and medical profession center around alcohol. And really, the research says if partners, particularly in bigger firms, top leadership is open and honest about why they maybe have struggled with it and how they came back, the stories like you tell, Gary, other people will be more likely to do it. Because a lot of times I think in the legal profession, you might hear, oh, we have an EAP and we will support you. But if they think the senior partners are going to find out or be judged by or judge them for that, they're still not going to take that action and get the help. And that's a little bit why AA can be kind of scary for people in legal or medical profession, because they don't want, to stand up in a public and form, because they feel like with the position they have in society, it's very uncomfortable, So
Right.
I think
I know a key focus on AA, its key principle is anonymity. And I chaired the lawyer assistance program in my area in Maryland for about 20 years. And that was a concern many folks have. But I would suggest anyone who's listening, who's afraid to reach out to help, contact your local lawyer assistance program. There are often other lawyers like you who may be in recovery and have the experience and stories they could share. They'll show you how it works. And the lawyer assistance program is always strictly confidential. No one will know. And the funny thing is, when I was an active alcoholic, I was hesitant to go into recovery because I might be judged. But yet I didn't mind being an active alcoholic. Like that's where the real judgment should happen, when I'm actually
exactly. And it's just so tough for people to kind of wrap their mind around it.
Right.
And we do things in counseling called motivational interviewing, where you can kind of like ask some questions to figure out a person's level of motivation to change. And a lot of times, unfortunately, in the legal profession, the motivation comes when you hit rock bottom. Something really bad happens, like get a DUI, or you embarrass yourself at an important retreat, or, just. So I encourage people to get help before you hit rock bottom, because that's embarrassing, those things.
Right. And it's often easier to manage it before you get so much deeper in the hole, What are some warning signs? If someone's listening to you today who's trying to kind of get a sense of where they are, what would be some warning signs or symptoms that they're heading down the path towards some mental health problem, whether it's depression or anxiety or a substance use disorder? What would be some signals that they should look for, like, maybe I need to change something, maybe I need to get some support?
That's a really great question. I'm writing a thing for the last week of May for Mental Health Awareness Month on the top 10 reasons you might be ready for counseling. And I think one of the biggest ones is if you're feeling, a lot of people describe that feeling as either empty or disconnected from your life, like you're not getting that joy. Like for most of us, you can probably think back to a time when you were young, maybe a kid, maybe teenager, where you just had joy in your life. You could go out and ride your bike for an hour and have fun, and you're not thinking about anything stressful. If you're at that point of your life where it's just, feel like I'm on a treadmill and I'm not happy, that is an ideal time to seek counseling. Waiting until you're severely depressed, severely anxious. I like to use the metaphor or compare it to medical conditions. If you take an antibiotic when you have a sore throat, you're going to get well pretty quickly. If you wait till that sore throat turns into, bronchitis, pneumonia, and goes septic in your system, you're looking for a lot harder, more tougher medical intervention. And it's the same with your mental health. Take care of it while you're just feeling a little off, versus waiting until you're feeling depressed and suicidal. Because that is an awful way to feel. And it's harder to get help because you feel hopeless at that point.
Yeah. From the lawyers you work with through New Leaf, that they are under incredible stress and time demands. They work very long hours, and they always seem like there's not enough time in the day. How can a lawyer like that, who feels like he just has no time, prioritize self-care and maintain a very healthy and appropriate balance between work and personal life?
It's a challenge. I will not give the answer without prefacing by saying it's harder for your profession than some others. But if there is any way at all, think about your day. We all have 24 hours in our day, and plan it. I think a lot of people just sit down at their computer, start working, and they just work. And then they take a break when they're exhausted and their neck hurts and maybe they're starving. plan your work with breaks scheduled in, and not just a break to go play a video game, but a break that you do some stretching. You go outside, being outdoors and connecting with nature, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. The sunlight is good for your melatonin production, which will help you sleep. A little exercise will help you. And you'll feel more refreshed when you get back to the computer too. I mean, that's a simple thing you can build into your schedule. Like put a timer on your phone and make yourself get up. That brief will not suffer but so much in 5 or 10 minutes of a mental health break. And also plan things that you look forward to. So maybe you only have Sunday off this week. Plan that day off. Plan it around mental health care, or whether that's getting caught up on your sleep, taking a walk with your wife, getting in the car for a drive. Something that almost rewards you, so you feel like you're moving forward instead of being like a gerbil on a treadmill, that's where the mental health issues come in, because then you feel like there's just, what's the point? And I don't want you to feel like what's the point? I want you to feel like I'm doing really good work here, and I can keep going. And being resilient is tough, but it can be planned into your day just like other things.
I love what you said. I've done both a newsletter and a podcast called Winning the Billable Hour Battle. And what I suggest to lawyers, because they all do exactly what you said. They go to work and then they just start working, and they haven't figured out what's most important to do first. And I even suggest that they literally plan their day before they get there. From 9 to 10, I'm going to work on this. From 10 to 11, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to take a 15-minute break. And people will say, I don't have time to take a break. But the reality is they're so much more productive and get so much more done if they take that break. And nothing is better, than stepping outside. What about other self-care? How important is sleep or nutrition or things of that, or exercise or things of that nature as kind of stress management mechanisms?
That's a great question. I think what happens if we don't talk about those things and put them in our life, we're going to find some kind of stress management mechanism, and we're going to default to unhealthy coping strategies like drinking or gambling or something. So you want to plan that. And I plan my day with breaks and all that, like you mentioned, Gary. What people need to do is really get focused on what is, back to the values. What do you enjoy? I often ask people, what did you love to do when you were a kid? Mm-hmm. And they might say, well, I colored, or I rode a bike, or I painted. I was like, then put that in your schedule at least a few times a week. Things that brought you joy when you were young are easy to tap into. They probably weren't very expensive. I call it a dopamine diet. We do a diet for self-care. But then sleep, like you mentioned, your body needs sleep. That's there's a lot of research that's come out in sleep in the last decade. And it says that when you fall asleep and you do a good sleep, a deep one, you're flushing a lot of toxins out of your system, not just your brain, but your body. And toxins can build up and affect how your wiring, your neurobiology fires, and that affects your depression and anxiety. So sleep is key. Diet, good food is good. Avoid as much as you can, like processed food that came from a factory, and move. Your body was meant to move. We were not evolved to sit at desks 14 hours a day, even a generation ago. I was talking with somebody about that last night. My parents, they grew from a time where, you put water from the well, and everybody did something physical.
Right.
Move your body.
We talked about how much stress and pressure lawyers are under, and some of it's time, some of it's demands of clients. What coping mechanisms or techniques to build resilience do you recommend for that highly stressed lawyer who might be listening today?
There's some really simple premises behind cognitive behavior therapy, which I mentioned earlier. We consider the gold standard. One of the things is to watch your thoughts. The CBT says your thoughts affect your moods, and then your mood affects how you act. So a very simplistic example is I wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, today is going to be horrible. I've got to deal with that nasty client and that nasty lawyer. And as soon as you think that thought, your emotion becomes, ugh, I don't feel good. And then how's your day going to go? The human beings kind of look for evidence to support their conclusions. So all day long, you're going to be looking for evidence that you're going to have a bad day. So really get in tight control on how you think about things. You can do it, especially lawyers, because they're training yourselves not to show emotion or how to have really tight thinking, logical arguments, you're a profession that's probably the best primed for CBT, but you have to be aware of it and watch your thoughts. So when you see it, you flip it. Or argue that flip thought.
One of the things I talk about a lot is the concept of acceptance. So often we let these outside influences. We have a managing partner who's difficult, a client who's too hard on us, another lawyer who's a pain, or too much work, things we don't really have a lot of power over changing how that other person is. But the one thing we do have power over is how we think and what we think about. And if we can accept those circumstances, but just being, they're just difficult circumstances, I can't change them. But what we can change is how we think about them. We can often reframe those thoughts. Because if we walk in with that negative attitude, like you say, it affects our whole day. We just made our day bad by having those negative thoughts and feelings.
And we do a lot of teaching of that in CBT. Like you focus on what you can control, and you have to let go of the things you can't control. And I can't control whether people like me. I can't control how the ruling's going to be. All I can control is how hard I prepared for it and what I did. And that's a core foundation of CBT, is that we get ourselves in trouble with 3 things that we think must happen to us. We feel like the world must be fair, people must like us, and I must be perfect. And that's the big one for lawyers.
Wow.
You've got to let that go. That's a false assumption. Argue that with your legal skills, people. It is a false assumption, and it will get you in a lot of
assumptions that the world is fair, that people have to like me, and that I have to be perfect. Because there are things I've struggled with my whole life. That's just not right. That person didn't treat me right. Or, I got to be perfect. Or I care too much about what other people think of me. I never know what they think. And I probably can't change it anyway. If they don't like me, if I'm nice to them, they probably still won't like me. So for the new lawyer who's listening, who's just entering the profession, and sadly, our law schools don't train us very well for being lawyers. They train us how to think. They train us how to research. We don't know what it's like to be a lawyer until we enter that maelstrom. What advice do you have for the lawyer who's been practicing 2 or 3 years, who really wants to have an emotional balance and mental wellness practices? What advice would you give that younger lawyer?
Some of the things we talked about, it's almost a good summary for what we've talked about, is plan that into your day. Make that a habit. Every night before you go to bed is a good time. I think it's nice. You reflect on your day, and you reflect on your successes. Be grateful for what you got. Practicing gratitude is huge. And plan your day. You've got certain meetings that are non-negotiable, but there's times in that day to walk, to see the sunshine, pet your dog. People think, well, that's dumb. I don't have time for that. But that's where the true calming sensations come into human beings. Because if you don't, and you're always jacked up, work, you're just pushing more cortisol and adrenaline through your system. And you've got to put some calming hormones in your system as well, or you're not going to be happy, or you're going to end up depressed or drinking too much. So it's health, not just mood, that we're talking about. Plan that into your day. There's somewhere in your day you can take 4 or 5 little micro breaks, I call them, and boost your dopamine. Dopamine, I call them the dopamine diet. Adding those things to your day is a dopamine diet, and you need it.
A lot of these things we've talked about can be addressed, it seems to me, by the law firm and the leadership in firms. I know many lawyers have told me they work in toxic firms, and others are not. I had a conversation with someone who's a wellness director for a firm, and she has a lot of wellness initiatives. But what policies or practices or initiatives have you seen leadership in firms initiate that have had some support in this area?
Yeah, I've seen some presentations that we've attended. They're calling, one idea is called communities of care, which is not new. It's in education and all kinds of things. But in a community of care, the leadership team kind of really strategically sets down, and they put representatives from all stakeholders, like your paralegal team or office. Everybody's stressed in a law firm, which is not just the lawyers, and figure out what those people really would find beneficial, and be willing to invest in it. And top thing I mentioned earlier is leadership really has to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and be honest with them. But I've struggled with that. 7 out of 10 lawyers struggle with anxiety. I can guarantee you some of those partners have anxiety and have found how much uncomfortable it is or how hard it is to bring it down after 20 years. If people will be more open and have conversations with everybody, everybody will start getting on board with it. And I'm also believe it, people need to start talking about it like it's physical health. You know, people will say, if this will prevent a heart attack, you're like, okay, I'll do that. I don't want to have a heart attack like my father at 40, you know, which happens a lot. And yeah, I mean, like I talked about it. You know, there are a lot of lawyers have irritable bowel disease, stress related. Come on, people. It's an investment in not just a feeling better mood wise, but physical health. It's really worth it for a firm if they could do that. But the community of care idea, I think, is really helpful because it's got all stakeholders on board. People get input into what they are getting, you know, what benefits the company's providing that they feel like they need. And then it's a better investment because people will use it. And that's the idea, is you're going to get a return on the investment.
Lisa, looking forward to the future, what do you see as new trends or developments in this area of mental health in a profession like law?
It's the youngest generation gets older and starts really getting into the partner level and all that. They have been the best advocates for mental health. And in fact, that group, I want to say they're like 75% or 80%, studies have shown 75, 80% likely to quit a job and leave a job because they consider it toxic for their health. I mean, they will vote with their feet literally and go somewhere else. And as they become stronger and stronger advocates, I think that's going to be a trend where some of the things I'm talking about won't seem so like mental health and physical health are the same. No, I think people will go, yeah. You know, I don't want to hit my 40s with high blood pressure and irritable bowel disease and shaky hands. I want to love my life and I want to be present for my kids and grandkids. So I think when we start getting that mindset, or if senior leadership could get that now, we'd move the needle even quicker. So that's my dream anyway, and my hope. It's kind of my passion, is to help people start thinking about it in a different way.
Lisa, I think it's wonderful. I want to thank you for what you do. Tell me briefly what New Leaf Teletherapy does and what they offer to the legal profession.
Yeah, what we do is we're slightly different than a typical EAP. In other words, an EAP, you might get a list of providers and you have to call them up. We try to take all the stress out of that. So if you work with us, you fill out like, I need to get some support on anxiety. It'll go into us. We'll link you immediately with a provider that's licensed in your state. We do teletherapy because I've found, particularly post-pandemic, people like doing their therapy or counseling like in the privacy of their own home, you know, in their own comfortable space in their pajama pants. That's better than, plus lawyers don't have time, you know, to drive somewhere and meet somebody in person. All that. We don't diagnose. I really am strong with a wellness model. We treat each person as an individual, and we have the client collaborate with us on what we call the treatment plan. So I would say, look, you've got anxiety. This is what I'm going to do. We're going to do 5 CBT modules, which are kind of educational. We're going to practice some things. We're going to do that. How does that feel to you? And if the client says, I don't know, I don't think I could do that mindfulness stuff. A lot of people hate meditation. They're too anxious to meditate. Well, like, okay, we're going to customize it right for you. And we measure it too. We do a lot of measurement. Like I like data. I'm a nerd that way. So I might do a general anxiety disorder assessment and say, oh, you came in at 15 out of 20. So let's try to get you down more into the 10 or 11, more normal level of anxiety. Mm-hmm. We're never going to be free of anxiety. That's the human condition, but we don't want it to be where you don't feel good all the time, where your heart's always pounding and your hands are always shaking and you feel awful. So we'll teach you strategies that move that down and do assessments every 4 weeks or so to kind of help you see how you're doing.
And from the clients that you and New Leaf have worked with, without obviously revealing any details of any individuals, have you seen that therapy is able to help a lawyer who's overstressed manage that stress better?
Because we do that assessments, we do data tracking, we have found that not with severe anxiety, but if somebody comes into us with what we call moderate or mild anxiety, we can see improvements start in about 5 sessions. Wow. Or about a month of treatment. Wow. In fact, good CBT would be 5 to 15 sessions. And that's another thing I'm a little different with, and that lawyers are afraid of, that when they go to counseling, they're going to be counseling forever and have to talk about these deep, dark secrets. We're not doing that. We're working on whatever you want to work on. And if it's improving your anxiety, we're going to first teach you about the biology, then we're going to figure out what strategies pull that level down for you. And everybody's different. But we have a pretty big toolbox. But yeah, I would encourage people.
And for those who are listening today, if you're a lawyer or legal professional and you feel some anxiety about where you are, about your practice, about your world, reach out to New Leaf Teletherapy, because they have therapists who are trained in working with lawyers and in helping you in apparently only 5 sessions. Can you imagine 5 sessions and your symptoms, how you feel, how you enjoy your life would be so much better. So it really is worth that call to make that happen. Lisa, I want to thank you for all the incredible advice and information you shared with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun, and it's neat to talk about something that's passionate to me. So I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Lisa, for anyone who's listening who'd like to get in touch with you or with New Leaf, how can they best do that?
Yeah, my email is lisa.ross, R-O-S-S, at newleafteletherapy.com. And then I have a work number if they really want to, if they want to call. It's 276-200-6641. Just leave a message because I probably won't answer it. I'm either in a session or talking to somebody, but I will call you back.
Great. Lisa, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to all of those who joined this really important session today. Your wellness is so important. I know we work hard. I know we're under stress, but there's nothing more important to you than enjoying your life and making it the best life possible and staying physically and emotionally well. So thank you all for listening. And as always, please be well, be safe, and be free.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Free Lawyer Podcast. Wherever you are listening, if you enjoyed what I shared, please leave me a rating and review. I would appreciate hearing more about what you like best and what topics you might like me to cover in future episodes. If you are interested in experiencing a more fulfilling and a more successful life, please contact me at www.GaryMiles.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me so I can learn more about you, your challenges, and your dreams. I appreciate each and every one of you, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks to all of you for your support.